Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624, or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome back, sir.
It's been a minute, Noah.
Okay, so it was kind of funny. We were talking about the whole mess that was CrowdStrike and all the people that were stranded and all the bad things. I didn't realize at the time that I was talking about it that you were living it. So you got stuck by it. It bit you, and even though your systems were all working, it turns out the places that you were flying to weren't.
Yeah. So I got stuck down in Raleigh, and I couldn't get out. I was supposed to have a plane on Sunday afternoon, and then I sat in the airport for 10 hours on Sunday, and that was a lovely experience, or longer. You know, it actually wasn't too bad. I went down to Raleigh to voluntarily to meet with a bunch of people from Red Hat that I don't get to see very often. They were all kind of congregating in Raleigh. So I went down there, and it just happened that I went with a friend of mine to the airport, and then his flight left, and then it was time for somebody else that I knew to come to the airport. And so I just had a stream of people to sit with while I waited for my flight to time out. So I guess that was all right.
Did you know at the time that you were waiting that the flight wasn't going to happen, or?
No, I had no idea.
Okay.
There were just various cancellations or delays and stuff like that. And you kind of had that feeling, right? You're like, it's going to be me, isn't it? But you looked up and you're like, well, it's a 50-50 shot. And you never knew why. So my plane was there. So sometimes it was that the oncoming plane didn't make it. My plane was there, but there was just no crew for me.
But you knew what was happening with CrowdStrike and just thought maybe I'll be one of the lucky ones that'll be able to sneak through?
Yeah, well, because flights were leaving. Like I said, I watched everybody else's flight leave. Yeah, it was just unfortunate. But overall, it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, I spent 4 extra days in a hotel, and that's a little bit expensive. But aside from that, it was just if you travel, you kind of assume the risk of traveling. And
it's a good way to look at it. What are you
going to do about it anyways? What are you going to do? Go back to the hotel and rage against the machine?
You know so a little off topic, but I watched a woman after the pilot tells us that the flaps, Steve, the things that give the wings enough lift to get off the ground, those things weren't working. And so he makes an announcement that everybody has to get off the plane. So we all get off the plane that we just got on. We're all sitting there. None of us are happy about it because obviously there's a delay, maybe a cancellation. We don't know what's happening. And I watched this woman just tear into this pilot. You don't know, you kick us off and you guys can't, blah, blah, blah. And finally I walked up to her. I'm like, do you want them to fly the plane without functioning flaps? I mean, do you want to die? Because that's what'll happen if he tries to take the aircraft off the ground and there isn't enough lift to get the plane off the ground. Do you understand that he's trying to save your life, that he doesn't want to do something safety because he and everybody else on board doesn't want to die? That's why we're here. Nobody planned for this. She was just incapable of comprehending the concept that there are things that are outside of our control, and sometimes bad things that are unfortunate or inconvenient happen, and you go, well, that's that. And then you move on with your life because there's nothing else you can do. And she wasn't willing to do that.
I mean, everybody's in a bad time. There was no reason to yell at the pilots or in my case, the lack of pilots or the Delta people that were waiting,
It's not their fault.
No, and there's nothing they can do. And you can just see. So I will say this. Honestly, I will continue to fly with Delta when I have a choice. They were great throughout the whole thing. The people were polite despite having just a terrible, it wasn't even a weekend. It was Friday right through to, the next Thursday. I
feel like it's not even Delta's fault though.
I called on Tuesday I looked at my flight on Tuesday. I'm like, I know I'm not going to make my connection. I'm not flying to another city to get stuck. I'm staying here. Right. So I called them and I was just like, okay, we need to change my flight. And they rearranged it. And I get off the call and I put down my phone, and then my phone vibrates. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I pick it up. I'm going to misconnect because my morning flight is leaving late. And so I already knew before going to the airport that I wasn't going to make my next flight for the next day. And it's just like, what are you going to do? Like, I could be angry, but what good does that do me?
Okay, so if you take your traveler hat up and you hang that on the rack and you reach over and put your system administrator hat on, what are your thoughts of the CrowdStrike? What are your takeaways?
Well, I mean, I'll answer that, but I'll answer that with a tangent. So I'm sitting at a restaurant and I come in and I was asking the waitress, like, how is she doing? She's like, it's been crazy. She's like, we have one computer for the whole restaurant, and it's not like the people in the back can't even see the orders going in. We have to do it by hand. And, she was writing the little note, and then she hit the spinner, like she stuck it on the spinner and then hit the bell sort of thing, like in the traditional, like
the way we did it for 100 years before we had. Oh, okay.
And so she comes back and she's like, you know why we did that? That computer was sitting in the closet and they forgot to upgrade it. So we pulled it out. And we have one working computer because they forgot to upgrade it. And so to answer your question, it's just like there's too much homogeneity in the systems, right? And that's obviously a problem because it just kind of rippled through the system. There was a snarky joke tweet from Southwest Airlines. And so the backstory here is Southwest is running Windows 3.1, like not actually a lie.
No, okay. I think somewhere this came up. Yeah, so, actual 3.1 because Yeah, so they're running Windows 3.1, and there was a very sarcastic joke tweet that came out that was like, so y'all need us now. We're just because we're running everything off of a Commodore 64 sitting in some warehouse in New Jersey, and then it was like go to heck. That's great.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, tough call all around, and I guess it shows that we need to have a better solution as society for how do we get into things, because like part of this problem, I'm sure is they had to actually physically go to machines because if you don't got a KVM attached to these things or some, Pi KVM, that sort of thing, you have to physically go there to fix this.
Yeah, no, it was a real pain. My thing was, and I said this on the show last week or a week before, whenever it was, we were talking about it, is, largely people they lost sight of their critical path, Steve. They lost track of what it is we need to be able to do the thing that we do. And in part of that was we had our eye on cybersecurity and wanted to check the box, not understanding or at least not entirely thinking through by checking this box. If this fails or if this goes catastrophically wrong, there really isn't an option B. And I think, I don't know, I hope we learn lessons from that, but I'm kind of pessimistic about the IT industry. It seems like we're very good and very much desire to offload things onto other places, as we will see later on as the show rolls on.
Yeah, you know what? I say we use some of the lessons that you and I have learned to go answer some questions. What do you think?
I love it. Our first email comes in from Blumenstrong. Blumenstrong writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. Regarding NetBox, I've tried to use it in the past to just document my switch ports so I can plug everything in correctly when I have the occasion to take it out. Installing NetBox was fine, but the setup is confusing. I spent maybe 3 evenings trying to enter in all of the data, and I still didn't have anything that was usable. To create anything, I'd need to create a template and then an instance of the thing, but that would need templates and instances of those templates. Sorry to say it, but it felt like turtles all the way down. I'd love to hear other people have been using it for a short time and their thoughts on how hard it is to get started, in case I was simply holding it wrong." It's a reference to an iPhone. So here's the thing. This is what has kept me out of it, or at least kept it out of Altispeed. I saw the product. I got very excited about the product. I started playing with the product. I thought there is a huge advantage in having a dedicated place to put documentation, and I like the fact that somebody has really thought about the best way to document all the things. Where the shortcomings are for sure is that it does not strike me as a particularly it is a struggle to get stuff in, and my biggest fear is it will be a struggle to get things out, which, Steve, that was your words of wisdom from the beginning of this whole thing.
It's always one of those things that regardless of whether it's an open source tool or not, when you get the information in, you have to think about a migration out, especially if it's going to be something that you're going to rely on, because who knows whether this thing is going to succeed? Who knows whether or not the project is going to take a direction that you don't like? You know, we've seen this in the past from various either password managers or, you know, one-time password codes and stuff like that. They just change things on you, and you have to figure out how you're going to get out of it if you run into those problems.
You can see how this would be a huge time saver and an efficiency tool if you had one environment and you were live, eat, and breathe inside of it, and you have a bunch of people that work in the said environment, and you need a collaborative way to know all sorts of esoteric details about a particular environment or about a collection of particular environments. I can absolutely see the value of this there. And indeed, tools put on this planet by DigitalOcean precisely for that purpose. So I think used in that way, I think it's great. But as Blumenstrong points out, if you're going to recreate a switch 450 times, it's great that you can create that switch one time, make it as a template, and then build off of it. If you got one switch, that's an awful lot of hoops to jump through so that you can remember what switch port to plug the access point in and which one goes to your wife's desktop and which one goes to the kitchen blender.
Yeah.
Our second email comes in from Jeremy. Jeremy writes in and says, in response to your question as to why people use Linux, here are my reasons for using Linux. 1, Linux is stable. 2, Linux skills can provide a decent salary even without a degree. 3rd, the cost of software is free. The software or security is good and open. And finally, open source allows the highest degree of customization of your machine. So if we were to boil that down, Steve, we would say it's free, it's secure, and it is flexible?
Maximizes choice?
Maximum absence of coercion. I like that. Our third email comes in from Jason. Jason writes in and says, hey, Noah and Steve, I know privacy focused when it comes down to your mobile phones. I, too, am always looking for ways to get Google out of my life and out of my pocket without giving up useful stuff. I'd love to try GrapheneOS, but currently, all I have are Samsung phones. Have you ever looked into Decloud Us? Just curious what your thoughts were. Thanks for all you do, Jason. So, I have mentioned this multiple times ad nauseum on the show, and I'm going to continue to beat this drum so that everybody knows how irritated and frustrated I am about this. I purchased a Samsung S10 with the expressed purpose of being able to flash it with LineageOS. And I checked before I ever bought the phone, and the S10 was a model that was included on their supported list. So I purchased an S10. I hit the end of when my carrier was pushing updates, and I thought, all right, now's the time to flash LineageOS. So I go to flash LineageOS. Guess what? Can't unlock the bootloader. I look into it further. They made 2 versions of the Samsung phone, of the S10. One is the international version, which has an unlocked bootloader, and you can do whatever you like with it because it's your phone. The other is a US version that the cell carrier specifically petitioned Samsung to make to where you can't unlock the bootloader. So this godforsaken brick that I now carry with me has its days numbered, and I'm going to be jettisoning it, and I will never, ever, ever own a phone made by Samsung ever again after this experience because I'm so irritated about it. Here's my plan, and Steve, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this. So I currently have a Pixel 6, and it works well with GrapheneOS. I love it. I am sold on GrapheneOS up and down and twice on Sunday. I've been using that's my personal phone, and I've been using it, and it works great. My next step is to get my work phone on GrapheneOS. So I think what I'm going to do, the Pixel 9 comes out August 15th, so that's just a few weeks away. When the Pixel 9 drops, the Pixel 8 is going to be reduced in price. I like the smaller form factor phone, which the Pixel 8 has, and the Pixel 6 and 7 do not. They're larger phones. So I think what I'm going to do, wait till the Pixel 9 comes out, purchase the Pixel 8. The Pixel 8 will become my personal phone, and I'll have a nice small phone that has slightly newer technology, and then the Pixel 6 becomes the work phone. Thoughts?
Sure. Why not? I mean, you're asking the wrong person when it comes to this. Like, does it make cell phone calls? Does it do 2auth? Done. Like,
that's true. Well, and here's a twist, right? So on this phone, I haven't actually used the cellular portion of it. So what I mean by that is my calls are all coming in with LinPhone as SIP calls. My text messages are all coming in through conversations as XMPP messages. And so really the only thing I'm using as a phone is the LTE mobile data service so that I can do all those things from anywhere. And the advantage that I see there is it allows me to seamlessly transition between a laptop and a phone. But I don't know. We'll see how it works. But anyway, to answer your question, Jason, there's no way to get GrapheneOS on anything other than a Pixel phone because it relies on a hardware chip that's in the Pixel that does hardware attestation so that you can't brute force your way into the phone. And that security feature is only available on Pixel phones. So it's weird. The best, most secure way to get away from Google is to use Google's phone and flash it with a different OS. But I have to tell you, I am beyond impressed. So this week, I migrated my dad over to GrapheneOS. That was an interesting challenge because I would definitely say he's techie, but he is not a person that likes to fiddle with things. He wants to have it set up, he wants to use it, and then he wants to move on with his life. And he's got a lot of very important things that he uses his phone for. So he bought a Pixel 8, handed it to me, said, do whatever you got to do to it, but get rid of Google. Wiped Google, put GrapheneOS. And when I say put GrapheneOS, if you flashed other ROMs on your phone, there was a very real chance that you bricked your phone or damaged it. With GrapheneOS, it's literally as simple as plugging a USB cable into it, and I suggest using the one that came with the phone, and then going to GrapheneOS site and clicking on the buttons in order that they tell you to do it, and then pushing the buttons on the phone as they tell you to do it. And by the time you're done with that process, you will have a phone with GrapheneOS. And if you want to reverse the process and go back to Google, you can do that in the same way. Now, here's something of note. Steve, when you switched over to GrapheneOS and you're using it as your work phone, you were using a popular 2FA app called Authy. Am I remembering correctly?
Yep.
Well, Authy is potentially being lost on GrapheneOS. Sean Wilden, who is the tech lead for hardware-backed security and Android, described the current reality of custom Android operating systems as a real threat and a security conundrum. GrapheneOS users discovered recently that Authy, a popular and generally well-regarded two-factor authentication manager, will not work on their phones running an OS intended to be more secure and hardened than standard Android. Quote, "We don't want to punish users of alternative OSs, but there's really no other option at the moment," Wilden added before his blunt conclusion. Play integrity has absolutely no way to guess whether a given custom operating system completely subverts the Android security model. So I'm interested, A, Steve, is Authy still working for you? And B, what is your next step if Authy becomes unusable on GrapheneOS?
So I am still using Authy. This came as news to me in the pre-show. I had no idea, so I don't currently have a fallback plan. One of the things I did investigate was using Bitwarden, because you can use Bitwarden for 2FA, but that seems just like a terrible idea to me, to have your passwords and your two-factor in the same spot. That seems to be just a terrible security stance.
It is you're putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping that they don't open the basket and get all the eggs
and walk away. Someone walks away with it. Literally.
So is it a completely smooth and paved path on GrapheneOS? No, there's obviously going to be challenges because you're bucking the norm, so to speak. But here's the way that I think I would frame this. The way that I would frame this is I am on the dark open island. And the dark open island is a place of serenity and peace, but the bridges back to the normal world are best effort, right? And so if you live in the normal world and you use all the normal technology, I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. I really have no desire or appeal for it. And honestly, as the years tick by, and I saw today, there was a news article talking about how you can now use AI on your Instagram account to, and I didn't look deeply into it, but apparently to interact with other people. So now we're going to use proprietary social media platforms, and we don't even want to be social on the social media platforms. We want AI to be us on the. I don't even know, Steve. And so I'm on Dark Open Island, and that's where I'm going to live. And to the extent that, and you're all welcome. So you're all welcome to come to Dark Open Island, but I will never be going back over to that world because there's nothing there for me anymore. It isn't the way I want to use technology. It doesn't align with my value system. And so I'm going to live here on Dark Open Island, and I'll continue to extend the bridge, and be a rock of stability for anybody else that wants to come to Dark Open Island. But on Dark Open Island, there are really two operating systems that you can use on your phone. And one is GrapheneOS and the other is LineageOS, because those are the only two operating systems that are out there today that compete with mainstream alternative OS, or mainstream mobile phone operating systems. Now, KDE Mobile, very, very hot on the heels. It's real close. If you're looking for general computing, it's great. Where things like KDE Mobile are going to fall down for you is if you need the app ecosystem that is Android. And what you're getting with GrapheneOS or Lineage is the Aurora store, right? And so you can just go pull APKs and run them on your phone. And it's interesting to me, and I think it's worth pointing out, the reason we have access to this is because Google open sourced the Android operating system, right? So Linux running on your phone, we have Google to thank for that. The fact that it's an open source operating system, you have Google to thank for that. And the fact that you can make the most security hardened mobile operating system ever created, you have Google to thank for that. And the hardware to place that operating system on, you have Google to thank for that. So as much as I will advocate that we de-Google our lives and move away from that direction, I also have a fair amount of gratitude towards Google for enabling all of this to happen, because without Google, there is no ASOP. Without Google, there is no Pixel phone. Without Google, there is no alternative. And so all of those things are largely there thanks to Google. But it's a tougher road to hoe to a degree. But the other side of it, I would tell you, is that with my dad, who again, fairly low tolerance to friction, he enabled Google's Play services. He installed Google Play, downloaded, so far as I know, all of his apps from the Aurora store. And as far as he knows, it's another Android phone, and it seems to be working just fine. And Steve, my understanding is, I think you had some call or text message problems, but other than that, that's been your experience as well, right?
Yeah, most of the stuff that I initially had has been resolved in some subsequent update. I'm a super light user of a phone, so I'm not really your best use case to trot me out unless you want to straw man an argument. I'm good at that.
1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. Chris calls from Canada. You're on Ask Noah. Good afternoon.
Hi, Noah and Steve. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing well.
Good.
So what I've got a question about my mother's laptop. Now, many years ago, I got her a used laptop at the time, and I didn't want to put Windows on it for her, so I gave her Ubuntu Mate, and this was 1604 at the time. The laptop has marvelously made it through every upgrade up to 2204 right now, but the laptop is getting old, and I was trying to get her a new one. When I clonezilla'd her disk from the old one to the new one, it didn't work, of course, because now the new one is UEFI only, and the old one was MBR partition style when I originally installed it. What is the best way for me to get her basically all her settings and everything over from the old one into the new one so she doesn't have to start from scratch?
That's a tough one. You could try install the Linux Mint has a backup tool, something similar to Time Machine, but it's not just for Linux Mint. That might be a possibility. That would be something that I would definitely try restoring into a VM to see if it works. The challenge is that all the applications behave slightly differently. That is just the reality that we live in terms of where they put their dot files and whether or not you can just grab the folder and have everything restore. Did they shove it in an SQLite database somewhere? Those are really, you know what? It's kind of funny because the iPhone is the same thing as is Android. It's kind of on an app by app basis how easy it is to migrate the data out of them. Do you have a better answer, Noah?
You know, in those situations, what I typically do is I take the cowboy approach. So, all right, we have the new computer and we install base operating system, we get everything up, and then the first thing I'll do, I will typically tar up the entire home directory and I'll just explode it onto the new machine. Actually, let me back up. Install all of the apps that are on the old machine on the new machine, and then move the home directory over, and that will get you 8 or 9 out of 10, not 80 or 90% of the way there. And then you're going to have to, for certain things, like Steve was saying, if you've got something that has its own little database or something like that, or authentication, that's a big thing too. You'll have to move some of that in. But a lot of times, for a lot of people, if you can get their bookmarks, if you can get their passwords, so that is to say, if you move their Firefox or Chrome profile over, that gets them a good long way. If you can move their Thunderbird profile, that gets them their email and all their folders and their filtering and all of labels and all of that. That'll get you most of the way there. But that cowboy approach of just picking up and moving it, the downside to... there isn't the downside. The upside to Linux is everything in the end is a file or a folder. So in theory, if you're willing to dig far enough, you're able to find and move them over. I understand your hesitation or your concern insofar as, man, you said you started at 1604?
1604, yep.
Yeah, so you're talking 7 years of use of stuff and of saving and of doing. I mean, it'll be hard to say where everything is. But I think that's where I would start. I would do a fresh install, and then I would move all of the user specific things over there after you had the applications installed, and just see if that doesn't get you there. And then if she says, "Oh, I opened this up and this is missing," obviously you still have the old drive, you still have the old machine, so you could potentially boot that up and then kind of deal with it on a one-to-one basis.
If she's using a browser like Firefox or something like that, enable the sync, because it will often get cranky if you just simply try and copy over the profile. Like if you launch the browser, it has been my experience, it's a 50-50 shot as to whether or not it'll take the profile that you've put there or whether it'll decide to just launch a new one.
No, well, yes and no. So if you rename, if you look in the home directory, under the config file, you have the Firefox profile folder. There's a unique string. You have to rename the string to match the old one. But if you do that, it will work. You will be able to just Firefox. In fact, I probably shouldn't admit this on the air, but I'm going to do it anyway. One of the things that you can do is if the Firefox profile is where all of the cookies are saved. That is to say, if somebody has signed into a website and they've clicked the little box that says stay signed in, if you have a copy of that Firefox profile, you can start Firefox up and be signed into those accounts. Not saying, just saying.
Okay.
Chris, does that give you at least a path to go down, or does that seem like that's approachable, or are we missing something huge?
Yeah. No, that's good. Now, 2404, I guess, should be being released, or if it hasn't already been
it's out.
Released for the upgrade. It is, for upgrading. So I'm just wondering, should I try and upgrade her first to that, or should I try and put 2204 instead onto this new laptop? The laptop is still a few years old, so I don't know how. And I'm going from Intel to AMD, so I don't know if that makes a difference. It shouldn't, I don't believe.
Steve, do you have a thought on 2204? I'm typically a go for the latest thing. I mean, I wouldn't if 24 had just come out. If it was 2 weeks old, I might tell you hang back a little bit. But at this point, they're going to have most of any of the release bugs worked out, and then you're set for the next 5 years.
Yeah, the only thing that I would think of that might stop me from that approach would be if I did a look for the hardware stuff, because sometimes moving between the latest releases, you get some regression, or the other problem that you might have is like, hey, I've got this. I'm just going to pick on the scanner because it's right in front of my face. I've got this scanner, and I go, blah, 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 scanner Ubuntu. And if I can't find something for 2404, maybe the 22, like you'll likely have it for the previous LTS, right? But maybe you won't for this current one. That might be a consideration if you're not good enough at fiddling with, okay, the 2204 said this, and maybe I do a little translation here to get this thing working. There might be some consideration like that for printers, for things of that nature, which might give you heartburn. Printers always give heartburn.
Another thing to throw in there that you just kind of made me think of is if I Google something, right, and I take the printer model and I'm like, HP M401, if I don't see anything, my presumption is that it probably works with Linux. If I Google that model and I see the first 5 results are how to get 401N working with Linux, that's my red flag of like, okay, I'm in for it. Or as Steve said, if you do it with a particular version number and you get a bunch of posts going, how do I get this thing to work with 2404? It works fine with 20. Okay, well, there's a red flag is to maybe, and at that point I would hold back. But if you don't have that, I think I would just go for the newest one. In part because as time progresses on, developers are going to have the time to dig through and say, "Oh, this new Wi-Fi card came out. That new Bluetooth thing came out." When I bought my latest personal laptop, it was an X14, and when I bought it, the little light on the back wouldn't go off when it went into standby. And somewhere down the line, there was an update, and now all of a sudden it works. And so, but it takes using the latest version to get that. But you're going to get the latest developments and the latest drivers and all of that. So as long as you don't have a regression, that's probably your better bet.
Okay, yeah, I've been lucky that my parents bought a Brother printer a long time ago, and that just works.
Yeah,
it's always just worked, which has been very, very nice. Okay, can I ask one more thing?
Yes.
Okay, so my mother is a snowbird, so she part of the year she's up here, and part of the year she's down in Florida. I was going to get her a second laptop so that she could have one in each place and not have to travel with it and carry it back and forth.
Okay.
Now, what would be the best way to basically keep the desktop and the 2 laptops synchronized so that when she makes changes in Florida or does stuff or saves files in Florida, they will appear back up here when she turns the laptop when she comes back?
Great question. Steve, I'm guessing you're going Nextcloud with this, right?
Yeah, that was my immediate knee-jerk reaction, absolutely. You could just, it would be kind of ridiculous, but you could just point your Nextcloud at your home folder, and then hopefully that grabs everything that she might have changed.
I'm going to throw a plug out there for C-File. If you told me I want calendar or I want email or I want any of that, anything more than just file syncing, I would absolutely tell you go Nextcloud all day long because it does the file syncing and it does a whole bunch more. And so if it gives you a lot of room to grow, and not the least of which is you can go to the web UI and get to your files, which is kind of a nice side feature. If all you're looking for is syncing, I would at least tell you to consider C-File from the standpoint that you install the sync client, you point it at the folder to include your home folder, and then you don't touch it. And just what happens on one computer shows up on the other. And so I would tell you to look at those two things. C-File or Nextcloud is probably the easiest way. SyncThing is also out there. The people that use it love it and tell me great things about it. It's a little too automagical for me. I'm more traditional insofar as I want to tell it pointed towards a folder and pointed towards a server. Where a SyncThing just kind of works. But that might be another thing to consider.
Okay. Thanks a lot. That's going to be great.
You bet. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of July 28th, 2024, here's the Linux and open source news. Deepin 20.9 has been released. Vanilla OS 2 Orchid has been released with a hybrid Debian base. Linux Mint 22 Wilma is now available for download. Wine 9.14 has been released. The open source IDE Qt Creator has released version 14.0. Sysvinet 3.10 is out, and Git 2.46 has been released. In open source hardware news, the TinyWatch S3 is an open source customizable smartwatch powered by an ESP32 S3 SoC. In open source AI news, the White House has said that there's no need to restrict open source artificial intelligence, at least for now. And NIST has released an open source platform for AI safety testing.
Kenny Schmidt. He is the lead installer and operations director for Altispeed Technologies and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. Welcome into the program, man.
Thanks for having me, Noah.
Okay, so this is really interesting because you and I have kind of gotten into cars. You've been into cars for a long time. I'm kind of catching up, and you've kind of been my friend and my ally in helping me with the tech side of it. And so you had an experience buying tools from Hobo Freight, which made an appearance on the show a couple of times. And you're here to tell me that everything I've told about Steve is wrong, that Harbor Freight is not a place that just makes cheap disposable things that break on you, that they last a long time and that you can get a ton of value out, right?
I would have told you that previously, I think. I think my opinion is starting to shift. I don't know if I'm ready to completely throw Hobo Freight, as you called it, out the door as an option for getting reasonably priced tools. But yeah, I did have kind of a crappy experience recently with their quality assurance, let's call it, of their tools. So I had 3 tools. I had a set of wrenches. I had a 3-ton it's a 3-ton low profile long reach floor jack and a dead blow hammer. And all 3, well, I have many more tools from Harbor Freight, but those are the 3 that I have found that broke on me and the experiences I had. And oh, by the way, all 3 of those broke over the course of, I think, 2 weeks as I was doing 2 or 3 different projects on my vehicle.
Okay, so tell me the story. So you go to Harbor Freight, you buy these tools, you need to do the repair. Now, you and I kind of share this model of, you're not, I want to be clear, you're not a person that is afraid to go drop some cash and buy a really nice thing one time and then take really good care of it. You're more than willing to do that. But at the same time, you're not a professional auto mechanic. It isn't what you do all day long. And so to a degree, you need enough tool to get the job done. So you decide you're going to do some work on your car. You go over to Hobo Freight, you walk through the tool section, you pick up the Pittsburgh that you need, and then what?
Yeah, so like say, I over the course of this, I had a very large repair that I had to do to my vehicle. So I had to replace a ton of suspension components. And in that, I needed to buy a lot of parts. I had a lot of tools already, but there were a lot of things I needed to get additionally. So I went and I spent a couple $100 on different parts at Harbor Freight, or tools at Harbor Freight that I needed. And I found that there were some tools that I'm actually glad that I bought the cheap one at Harbor Freight, because I found and I learned the lesson of, I'm glad that I bought the $5 or $10 version of that tool instead of buying the 20, 30, 50, however much more expensive tool, because of the fact,
even though it broke,
because specifically for that tool was because it was something that I found that I didn't even really use, or that style of tool was something that I don't really enjoy working with. The example I had was there's these angled socket adapters, basically, so you can kind of use them to get at different things. And I found most of the time when you try to use them, they would just slip off and go flying, and they just didn't work very well. So I'm glad that in that case, I bought the cheap one. The things that I'm regretful of not buying the quality one are, I think, what I would consider more the necessity items. The items that for a fact, if you're working on a car, you're going to use them probably almost every time or very, very regularly when you work on the car. Things like the wrenches, the jack, your hammers, those kinds of things that those are going to be repeat use tools. I'm starting to get away from the wanting to do that cheaply. Just go get the nice ones for that kind of stuff. But for the things you're like, I'm not sure, I kind of want to try this thing. It might be helpful. It might make the job get done a little quicker. That's where I'm thinking the value is.
What was the impact to the job itself? So, okay, the tools break and it is what it is. But at the same time, you're at your house, it's the evening, you're working on it, probably not in the prime of day, and all of a sudden all these tools break. what does that do to the impact of the job?
Oh, it was huge. For there was two big ones. I'll start with the biggest. The biggest was the floor jack failing. So I had the vehicle jacked up and on jack stands, and all of a sudden I noticed that I can pump the jack, but it won't actually go up. It'll go up, but it won't lift the car. So the car is now...
That's a problem if you're a jack.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the one job you got to do is just lift it up. And couldn't even get that right. And so what ends up happening is I have my car that is drained of transmission fluid, and it has lifted up significantly in the air. I feel stranded at this point. It's also, I think
you are
stranded
at that point.
I was going to say I really was. And so it's 8:00 at night. Luckily, cars come with, most of the time, in the trunk, there is a little scissor jack. And I'm ingenuitive enough to just know that, I can go grab that out of the trunk and do it by hand. Man, it was a pain in the butt though, because those things just suck. But yeah, if I did not have that, if for whatever reason I bought a used car and the previous owner broke it or something like that, and that jack wasn't there, I would have been just stuck, and I would have had to call a friend and be like, "Hey, can you come over with your jack and come get my car down? Because right now, I can't even move it. I couldn't even try to do something stupid and try to drive it off the jacks because there's no transmission fluid in it because I just drained it because I was working on the car.
Also, the wheels are in the air.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Doing wheelie things.
Yeah, couldn't even try that even if I wanted to.
So, what's your takeaway from the experience? You said, so it sounds like it's a split take. It sounds like you're still not out on hobo freight. Sounds like you're still willing to buy cheap stuff that you know is going to break. So in light of the fact that it costs you time, it costs you frustration, did they replace the tools?
Yes and no.
Okay.
They replaced 2 of the 3. And this is where I think it's really important to pay attention if you decide to continue to use Harbor Freight or hobo freight tools. Watch the warranties. So they tell you when you go to Harbor Freight, all the hand tools are lifetime warranty. So you think, this is great. I'm going to go in and get a bunch of tools. So
and they'll last me my lifetime.
Exactly. And if they don't, I'll bring them back in and they'll replace them. So they replaced 2 of the 3. The 2 that they replaced were the dead blow hammer and the wrench. They did not replace the jack.
Oh.
Because they don't consider the jack a hand tool.
Fair.
I kind of see it, but at the same time, it's not a power tool. You still use your hands to pump the jack. It's a little less, you don't hold it in your hands when you use it,
right? But
it still feels kind of like it almost could be cut. So, so you don't really think about that when you're purchasing it. You go, it's a tool. It's from Harbor Freight. They should have the lifetime warranty.
Do anything for you?
And so they did absolutely nothing.
So you're just out a few $100.
I think it was like $250 for the jack. Around that, I could be wrong. Maybe closer to $300. But the alternate perspective that I have on that is because I'm still battling this in my head. Literally, I just got back from Harbor Freight doing this return, and as I look at the price of alternatives that do have a lifetime warranty for their floor jacks, Snap-on is one of the competitors, right?
Yeah.
They've very similarly designed their jacks. They basically ripped them off, right? And so I look at Snap-on, they offer a lifetime warranty. However, their tool is, when I Googled it, $1,030.
So you're about to buy
so
it
I'd have to buy
times.
4 of these jacks to be able to make up. So I think about it and I go, okay, this jack, I believe I've had it for 5 years or just shy of 5 years. I've had it for a very long time. And I've done a ton of oil changes, transmission fluid changes. I worked on my old car that was a total beater, and every weekend something was breaking on it. And I was constantly using that jack. But it finally broke after 5 years. And so I'm still not entirely sold on saying, yes, just go buy the Snap-on for $1,000. And I'm still not even on the side of go buy a used Snap-on, because when I did a little bit of looking into used Snap-on stuff, from what I can tell, if you want to warranty a Snap-on jack or jack stand, what you need to do is provide a proof of purchase. So even if I wanted a lifetime warranty, I couldn't just go buy a cheaper used version. I would have to go buy the new one to be able to provide a proof of purchase to be able to get it warranted. So I'm in the same boat. If I know that, these tools are similar in quality, when I look at, because of the way they are physically made, the parts that they use are very, very similar. They're almost identical when you look at them side by side. It still doesn't even really make sense, but I'm torn. That's where I think I'm at right now. I'm in that very middle ground, torn. I don't know if I would go spend the $1,000.
I'll tell you, here's a hard rule for me. I don't know that I could bring myself to spend the money twice. I could see myself spending the money one time, and if it makes it through and I get more out of it, then the way I would look at that is that tool doesn't owe me anything. I bought my set of gauges to do one job. It did its job, so I got my use out of that tool. It doesn't owe me anything. Everything else is icing on the cake. So I'm okay with it there. I think I would really struggle, but that's a disposable item, right? It's a consumable at that point. It's a drill bit, it's a paper towel, it's a roll of toilet paper. Now, if we're talking $5-10, I'm okay with disposable things. $200 jacks, I feel like I struggle a bit to buy a $200 disposable jack. And so then I start to think, okay, you're not wrong that you'd have to buy 4 of them, but if it's 5 years a piece,
that's 20 years.
Well, it's 20 years. If I buy the lifetime one time, if I make it 21 years, I'm ahead of the game. I plan to live more than 20 years. I'll probably still need to elevate my cars 21 years from now.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if I still can own a car at that point. So I feel like that's where my line is like I would struggle to go back and do it a second time. And I feel like that almost breaks the heart. So the Hobart Freight rule is, you buy it once, get you as far as you can. Then when it breaks, you know that you have more need for tool than it has life in it. And then you go buy the longer longevity tool. So anyway, I appreciate you sharing this with me, and I appreciate you kind of going through breaking down your thought process as to how you're going to approach this going forward. So still a Harbor Freight customer, still willing to do it. And to you, the tool is cheap enough that and you feel like you get enough value out of it that if you're buying it every few years, that's an okay thing.
Yeah.
There's just the inconvenience having to run over there and grab another one is how you would frame that.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to exercise a little bit more caution when I walk into Harbor Freight. Looking at, hey, if I am going to spend $200-300 on a product at Harbor Freight, I'm going to look and see, okay, what is the warranty on it? Is this something that I'm going to actually check it instead of just going, I think that has a warranty because it's, they say you have lifetime warranty on everything. And really, it's not. And so, just a little bit more discernment about, does that look like it actually is a decent quality tool? And if it isn't, I might just stay away from it and go get the nicer one, and being a little more weary of warranties. I think those are the 2 bits of advice I would give someone if they decided they still wanted to shop at Harbor Freight. And I think that's the grain of salt I'm going to carry when I walk into their store.
Tell me about the dead blow hammer that came apart. This is funny.
The dead blow hammer, I have to give Harbor Freight a lot of credit for replacing the dead blow hammer, because
it was no longer a dead blow hammer, but you came back.
It really wasn't. So a dead blow hammer, the concept is it's a big rubber mallet basically, but on the inside it's hollow, but then it's filled with these BBs. And the idea is when you swing back, all the BBs roll to the back of the hammer, and when you forward and hit the actual item, all those BBs come crashing forward and you have more momentum. So as I'm working on my car and I have this stubborn piece of metal that's decided to weld itself to a different piece of metal because we live in a climate where there's salt and snow and ice and heat and cool, and it just makes these car parts just weld together. So I take this hammer and I just start beating on it, and I have a fair bit of strength. I do strength and conditioning training. I'm a very strong, large guy, right? And I'm taking this hammer and I'm swinging it back as hard as I can and just crashing it into this part. Repeated, probably for hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. I spent a lot of time trying to get this stupid piece of metal off with this hammer.
Did it work?
And by the end of it, I did. Actually, no. And it wasn't, I actually ended up, what I did was I took the 2 pieces. I got frustrated with it after just banging on it for so long. I took the 2 pieces. I walked outside. I found the biggest rock, almost classified as a small boulder, maybe even. And I took the pieces and I just threw it at the rock, and both fleeces, sure enough, bing, went just complete opposite directions. And so, moral of the story is, don't use a dead blow hammer. Just throw it at a rock. It'll be fine.
Right, that worked.
But yeah, and in the process of using this dead blow hammer, the rubber that goes around it to, because the idea is you want force, but you don't want to mar up or destroy the metal. And at that point, I didn't really care. I just wanted it apart. And so the rubber had, because I had been beating on it so repetitively and so hard, the rubber had started to misform, get cuts in it from the metal, and shred the front cap. And so the rubber comes off, and I finally hit it one of these last times, and I'm getting to the point where I want to give up on this thing. And so I hit it with a little bit extra oomph this time, and I really whack it. And I hit it, and the rubber peels all the way the rest of the way off, and the little metal cap on the inside pops open, and I just hear ding, 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 ding. And all those little BBs that were inside of that hammer just went flying all over my garage floor.
So now we have two problems. We have no dead blow hammer, and we have a mess.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience. Last thing, we talked about LubeLogger on the show. You've been living in LubeLogger. What do you think of it?
This product is fantastic. So it's a free and open source project. And what it is it basically is a way for the DIY mechanic, the home mechanic, to be able to keep track and take good care of their vehicles. The problem I had was I wanted to replace a ton of parts on my car. I knew I was capable of it. I've done it before. However, the first thing that came to my mind was when I bought this car, the first thing I did was went to the dealership that I knew it got serviced at, and I asked for the service history, and they gave me a record of every single maintenance that had been done on the car.
Yeah.
And I realized that, eventually I'm probably going to want a little bit nicer car, and I'm probably going to want to sell this car. And I want to be able to provide some sort of documentation to the next owner and go, hey, here's a record of all the things that I've done. And I don't want to just hand them a piece of paper with a bunch of scribbles on it and go, yeah, trust me, I'm a good mechanic. I think I know what I'm doing.
I did all the work. I just lost the receipts.
Yeah, I wanted to be able to provide some sort of professional looking, good quality documentation. And then on top of that, I also wanted to be able to go back and look and say, okay, what parts did I buy? Where did I buy them from? How long of a warranty do they have? And I can just keep track and record of that. And I can always go back and look back at that. And so I've been using it for that. It's been incredible. I've been using it for a couple other things as well. It does tracking of fuel consumption. It has a notes section that you can attach PDFs. So I have the maintenance guide, I have the service manual, I have the service history from the previous dealerships where it got taken care of. It has tracking for taxes. So renewal of the registration, it can keep track of that. And then once you have all that data put in there, it'll generate a report for you. And in that report, it'll tell you the total cost, everything you've spent on the vehicle just to maintain and keep it running. It'll tell you a breakdown of the total cost per mile. It'll tell you the average fuel economy. It'll tell you all of it. And it's just a really, really well-built tool that I just think deserves a lot of credit. It's really well put together. And if you're a DIY home mechanic, go check it out. It's cool.
The name of the software is LubeLogger. Kenny Schmidt, lead installer, operations director for Altispeed Technologies, and a guest this hour on the Ask Noah Show. We appreciate the time, sir. We'll get you back soon.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So, Steve, I hate losing ground, but I'm guessing that conversation didn't change your opinion on Harbor Freight a whole heck of a lot.
No, I just think that it makes the economy go round, right? So you take your money, you throw it down a hole, and there's a lot of knock-on effect for all the people that will actually benefit from that. All the people that are involved in writing the paperwork to do the return, and the people that are doing the recycling and so on. It all comes out in the wash. If you got the money for it, I say go for it.
So effectively what you're saying is if I want to throw my money away, then you see some value in allowing the money. It's kind of like those little things they have in the mall where you put the coins in and then they spin around and it gives entertainment as you watch your money land at the bottom of the pit, kind of a thing.
Yeah, kind of like
it's
that.
Entertaining to watch it. So in this case, you have to go make some friends at Hobo Freight and give the recycling guy a job and the driver person a job
Exactly. Make the world go round.
But I haven't convinced you that it's a great place to buy things.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's wonderful.
Hey, the music in our ears means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. We record the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can join us live by going to AskNoahShow.com. You want the latest? Follow us on Twitter. I'm at Colonel Linux. He's at Linux Ovens. The show at Ask Noah Show. We're back next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. AskNoahShow.com.